Hey, everybody, it's Devin.
And Kate.
Oh, and Nurse Allie.
There she is. Welcome to Med Crimes.
Oh my God, I can't believe I just heard that in real life. I'm freaking out, you guys.
And I can't really believe that we just heard, and it's Nurse Allie in real life because we're obsessed with you.
So if you haven't figured it out yet, people, we have Nurse Allie with us.
TikTok sensation, meme queen, super relatable nurse TikToker that we're like super obsessed with. She's so funny. And if you guys are not familiar with her, Google her. And she's on Instagram. She's on TikTok. She's on all the cool places.
There's two Nurse Allies if you Google it. I'm the hospice one.
Hospice Nurse Allie. The Hospice Nurse Allie is the best Nurse Allie as far as we're concerned because we're obsessed with her.
And you're here. So hello.
Oh
and she's here.
I can't believe it. I'm hearing you guys it's crazy. I've been listening to you guys for, I don't know, I binged you guys, all your episodes while I worked. And I was like, oh my God, each one just got better and better and better. And then I realized I got to the point where it said play any ones that are like unplayed or whatever. And I had none left. And I was sad.
Oh, what a sad feeling.
You were sad.
Yeah.
What a sad feeling. Well, we're super happy to have you with us, and we are like so excited.
You're officially our first guest host. So this is
that.
huge for us. We've talked about it. We've talked about it several times. Like, who did we want to like incorporate? What would be the right thing? Did we, should we pick a Patreon? Should we do this and that? And so to incorporate our first other nurse, it's really awesome.
I'm so excited. And I listened to this over and over and over again because I was like, I gotta like take notes and be up on my game about Dr. Satan.
Be a part of it.
And then I saw his picture and I was like, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, exactly. He looks like literal Dr. Satan. Yeah, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new Patreons.
Whoa!
I
wow!
know. Yay us.
Oh my goodness!
Yay!
Wow!
Us.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
So, girl. Jamie Richards.
Hey, Jamie.
Hey, girl. What up? Katie, you're Polly. Rare.
I love me some Katies.
Katie with a Y, which is sexy. Okay. We have Rare. We have Janet Collins.
Janet, welcome to the family, Janet.
Welcome. We have Cheryl Hill.
Cheryl Hill, you're on top of the hill. Hi, Cheryl.
What's that song that was really having a moment right now because of Stranger Things? Running Up the Hill. Cheryl is running up the hill.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Shocker.
Okay.
Running up that hill.
Thank you, Nurse
Allie knows.
She knows what's up. Emily Myers.
Emily. God, I'm loving all
Emily.
these Patreons. Welcome.
I know.
Welcome.
And last but certainly not least, Michelle Crone.
Hi, Michelle Crone. Welcome to our family. Okay, Kate, there's 6. Do we have what is a group of 6 woodland creatures? What can they be? What are they?
So these people are fancy minotaurs, just like climbing trees and just kicking ass and taking names and probably fighting some crazy war or some shit.
Doing
you guys
all
are such
shit.
badasses. It's ridiculous.
Welcome
yes.
to the family, everybody.
That's a lion?
No, I think a manticore is like a half lion, half eagle, right? What is a minotaur?
Did manticores last
I
time.
always have to Google these things.
So a minotaur, okay. A minotaur is the half man, half bull. Yeah. Yeah, that's what you guys are. Fuck yeah, minotaurs.
Fuck yeah, minotaurs. Oh
Fuck
my
yeah.
God. 6 Patreons. That is so wonderful. Thank you, all of you.
So Nurse Allie gets to join us for part 4 of our Dr. Satan series, which I think is finally going to come to a dramatic conclusion today, which I'm fine with because my brain is pretty fried from
The long
just
one.
This
Long
man,
one.
this man is a lot. I mean,
This
I
man
think in
is
part
so
3,
much.
I think I called him worse than a Nazi. I mean, and there's really, you
Yeah.
didn't think that there would be more than what's worse than a Nazi, but man, he is there.
It just kept getting worse
there.
and worse and worse as each part came
It
out.
does. And it's going to continue getting worse and worse. And then, Devin, it's interesting that you called him worse than a Nazi, because at the end of this, you're going to be like, nope, he's like an actual Nazi, but like the big like final boss of Nazis. It's like crazy. It's crazy.
Great.
What he does.
Oh,
I
God.
know. So without further ado, as a brief little overview of part 3, I'm not going to recap parts 1 and 2. Please have already listened to those by the time you get here to part 4, because there's just so much.
And it's so heavy that like, enough.
Yeah. I know, right? Like literally enough already. So we talked in part 3 about the findings on Marcel Petiot's property, which were like countless body parts, human remains, mostly women. And the search of the home revealed numerous belongings, women's clothing, some of which were like weirdly sort of on display. We talked a lot about the political situation at the time, which was very tumultuous because of Germany having occupied France around this time. He was able to avoid prosecution by French authorities, even though they had all these findings in his house, because he just assured everyone that they were Nazis that he murdered. And that was like enough for the
And wasn't
authorities.
he, it's been a little bit since I've heard part 3, but wasn't he was telling the French police, there's Molly again.
Yep.
He was telling the French police that they were Nazis, and he was telling Nazis they were part of the resistance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
The child's
Wasn't he doing that?
Yeah, exactly. But then like there was like a child's
head.
like
Yeah.
remains found in the boiler. So it's like, really? That was a spy? Okay, whatever. The German government did detain him for a period of time, him and his wife and his accomplices, because of the suspicion that he was killing Nazis and German spies. But it was found that that was very unlikely, that these bodies were Germans, and he was released from their custody because they were like, well, as long as, you know, you're not committing crimes against us personally, we really don't care. Let France deal with you. And then the invasion at Normandy happens, and the investigation just like is stopped completely. So everything's like halted. It's put on a standstill due to all the resources being pulled from the German and the French governments to the front lines. So where we left off, he's still a free man, even though there were like 26 bodies found in his home. And he's just, you know, fucking around in Paris.
Which, you know, like at the end, I'm like so pissed off. Like, how is he a free man? But
I know.
then when you think about D-Day, well, okay, yep. I again, the geopolitical climate totally takes a part in this whole thing, because I feel like that dude could have been stopped a lot longer ago.
Absolutely.
Like, timing was in his favor.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it made everything, even this crime. I mean, just like today, everything becomes political. You know, every single thing, no matter what it is, becomes political. It's the same situation back then.
That's when it started.
So, Marcel and his accomplices are all free. He's got like 1 million lives. He's like a cat with 9 lives. And he's like, okay, well, he knows, you know, I'm not going to have this opportunity forever where I'm going to be able to, you know, have the attention not be on me. So he takes this opportunity, this brief opportunity from being out of the spotlight, to essentially go into hiding. So he ends up staying at a few friends' houses, some friends that he's made in the resistance. He grows his beard out, he grows his hair out, and he's like looking real shaggy. Like there's a couple pictures floating around on the internet of how he looked, and he was looking like a real hairball for a while.
I realized he could get worse.
It gets worse.
Where's his wife?
So we'll get there. Stay tuned. So he's now barely going outside, barely engaging with people, like really trying to lay low. And he actually finally moves in with a patient of his named George Retude. And he, by this time, like adopts various aliases. So he's this whole period where he's free before he's like finally apprehended and arrested lasts about 7 months. So he's like 7 months where they've like literally found human remains in his home, and he's just
Chilling.
Just chilling.
Living 2 lives.
He's
just probably thinking, oh, they forgot about me. Sweet.
Yeah, he's vibing. He's vibing. So Petiot's most commonly used alias around this time was Henri Valeri. Henri Valeri. Yes, thank you. So, and because he's like a narcissist and really just cannot help himself, eventually he joins the French Forces of the Interior, or the FFI. And this was like a newly formed extremist group that was for the resistance in France. And actually, they notoriously... France!
Sorry.
It was your turn.
Oh my God, I love it so much. So this group, actually, the FFI, was pretty notorious because they ended up fueling the liberation of Paris down the road. They were like the huge group that was behind the battle that ended up liberating Paris in 1946, I believe it was. So it was like a pretty big deal. And so he joins this, the FFI, and he climbs the ranks very quickly because he's just, so good at talking and so manipulative. And eventually he made it to the rank of captain within the FFI. And his responsibilities included like being in charge of counter-espionage and like spy interrogations. Like he was like a huge deal.
While he was in hiding?
Yeah, in hiding. He had so he was going by Henri Valeri, and he had grown his hair out. He had a new appearance. He was somewhat out of the spotlight around this time, so people weren't paying as much attention. All of the focus was on the war and the resistance. So he was just like, put me in, coach. I got this.
Captain's kind of a big title to get up.
Exactly. It's like he was like a huge deal.
He probably made flyers.
Probably made some flyers. I don't know. Maybe he took a break from the flyers when he was actively like trying to not draw attention to himself, but also he's like, maybe if I make myself look different enough, I can still draw attention because I'm a narcissist and I love that shit. He loves his attention.
Of course.
So the war is like still very much in full swing, but as we get further away from D-Day, the media begins to return their attentions to the findings at the Petiot home, largely because, all of these bodies have been found. There are missing people in the area, and there are families that are like, maybe that was my brother, maybe that was my sister. So now, the families are putting pressure on the French police to return their attention to this whole situation at 21 Rue Le Sueur. So the media starts getting, a hold of this and starts really, taking some artistic liberties, as the media still do and intended to do back in that day. They started to make some like creative nicknames. This is where Dr. Satan came from. That was one of the media did that. The New Bluebeard was another one. And the Monster was a big one. And this media coverage just started to grow, and it ended up putting enough pressure on the French police that the case that was still wide open was getting a whole lot more attention given to it.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, I'm glad that the name Dr. Satan stuck over the rest of them because they are not even as severe. And I even still feel like we need a more modern name for him that's even worse than Dr. Satan. I don't know.
Do you have any ideas?
Not at the moment.
All
Nothing's
right.
at the tongue. I mean, Dr. Satan is good, but I mean, I just want to say, like, I don't know.
Dr. Famunda Cheese.
That's it.
That's it. Dr.
I'll make
Famunda
flyers.
Cheese.
I'll make the flyers.
I hope you do. Make the flyers. Okay, so the case is still wide open. So the police commissioner, Massu, who we met in the previous episode, is now like turning his attention back to this case. And he's like determined. He's like, I'm going to close this. He's getting a lot of pressure from the media and from the families in the area. I mean, they knew that Petiot was heavily involved and had done this, but the physical evidence made things really tough because aside from the body parts themselves and the way that they were cut and the findings from the medical examiner, there was really no great way to tell who killed these people aside from the fact that they were in Petiot's home. And they knew that because of who Petiot was, there's no way he acted alone. So, what was the depth of his involvement there? Were there other people involved? So this was a lot more complicated than it seemed on the surface. So this case starts taking over the media in such a way that the war is, secondary. So, the front page, the headlines, was the war, and now it's Petiot. They had performed that search of the property. They identified in total 47 suitcases, all stuffed with belongings like clothing, shoes, jewelry, undergarments, hats, things that people would have been traveling with.
Wasn't he burning some of those too?
He was burning some belongings too.
So it could be way more than even 47.
It could be. Now, the other piece of this is that the police then start to reach out to other people in Petiot's circle as well as his family. Now, remember, he had a brother, Maurice, who we haven't really talked about since the very, very beginning of this series. Well, Maurice actually lived still in Auxerre, which was their hometown where they were both born. He had property in Auxerre, and Marcel had a property in Auxerre as well. And police reach out to him because they're like, he's his brother. Maybe he knows something. And initially, Maurice says, well, we really don't talk a whole lot. He was pretty estranged because of his mental health issues. And I really haven't talked to him or seen him in a while. And I know that he's in the media now, but I really haven't heard from him. I have nothing that I can help you guys with. Sorry. Well, police went and they pulled telephone records and they found that there had been multiple telephone calls, very recently, between Petiot's residence and Maurice. So that was a lie. They've obviously been communicating. So once they had that bit of information that Maurice was lying about something, they obtained a search warrant for his property. And they found at the Auxerre property of Maurice Petiot more suitcases, more belongings, some of which had names and initials in them. Some of them had them, ripped out or destroyed.
Did he have an incinerator too?
He did not. But what they found there was a shitload of belongings, no bodies or remains in Maurice's home, but a lot of belongings. So,
wow.
They're starting to sort of
What
form...
did that dad do to his sons?
Oh, I
right?
know,
We
right?
were talking about this in episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, if the brother's like, all right, cool, I can get on board with this, then he's fucked up too.
I mean, I think, yes. And I also think that Marcel, I keep wanting to say Maurice, but Marcel is very manipulative and probably can get just about anybody to do just about anything for him. As long as he's not disclosing the whole truth, which is that he's, killing people because he's a psycho and he enjoys killing people. If he's putting out there that, yeah, I'm killing Germans and you're part of the resistance and you're helping me, then, he's which obviously murder's not okay. But, in that way, he's being manipulative.
But women's belongings, you think that would have set off in his mind, what German soldiers are women?
Are wearing these,
all
fancy
casual,
necklaces.
Right, all these little things.
And this many.
Yeah.
What are we doing with all these? And I'm
47.
sure there was children. I'm sure there was children stuff in there too.
Exactly. So Massu, who's the police commissioner in charge of this whole investigation, had pored over all of the logged evidence with a fine-tooth comb. He actually later said during the trial that he knew this house, 21 Rue Le Sueur, better than he knew his own bedroom. He knew every nook and cranny in that house and every little drop of blood that was found, every body part in every different spot. All this time, additionally, they're still pulling remains from the Seine River.
Oh my God.
They're still
because that's where it started.
Oh my
That's where it started, and it did continue to some extent because they're still pulling out trunks, and a lot of what they're finding are these big trunks that are bound, with rope around the trunks, and every time they see a trunk, they're like, oh shit, here we go, here's another one, and then they pull, the trunks out, and this is a little graphic, but most of these remains were, decapitated corpses who also had their hands and feet removed, presumably to prevent identification.
Oh, man.
If you remember that presumed first murder, his old girlfriend, Louisette, was pulled out of a river in a trunk.
Yeah, that one. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
The fire was the friend's wife, but
yes,
this one.
Yep. So very similar MO there. Masu, the police commissioner, knew he had to have, a ton of accomplices and a ton of people who knew exactly what he was doing in order to be able to make this whole thing work. But what he wanted to do was find physical evidence that he himself committed the murders, and that's what was tough. Other finds included trunks filled not only with dismembered parts, but remains that had been mutilated, which makes this really interesting. So that kind of negates that whole claim that he has that, I was just murdering and disposing of, German soldiers and blah, blah, blah. For example, and this does get graphic, FYI, they would find hands without skin and without fingernails. And they found this is a lot, they found entire faces of skin, intact faces of skin.
Just
faces.
Ripped off.
Just surgically excised. What reason would you have for that unless you're just a psycho that likes to do this shit?
He's getting pleasure out of it somehow.
Yeah, well, he is. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They found several scalps with different colored hair, like blonde hair, brown hair, red hair. Oh. They found the skin of legs and feet, intact. They found several, swaths of skin, big removed parts of skin, what? And, of course, severed genitalia of different kinds.
There's a movie that's semi-modern that I'm trying to think of, and I for some reason, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is coming to my mind, but I don't think it's that one.
Is it the one where the guy tears the skin?
Yes.
Of his
Wild Bill. Wearing it. What the hell was that? Silence of the Lambs.
Thank you. Yes. And he's sewing it all together and making
the put the lotion in the basket guy.
Yes, that's exactly. This is the put the lotion in the basket guy of Paris in 1940.
Oh my God.
Okay. This next part's interesting too. So one thing that the medical examiners noticed about the remains that they found, apparently around that time, if you were a medical examiner conducting an autopsy or a dissection of any kind, a common habit that you would have if you needed to put your scalpel down, say to pick up another instrument or tool, would be to, instead of placing it on the table next to you, would be to stick it in the thigh of the cadaver. And they did that for a reason.
Why not?
Well, they did it for a reason because when you have a slippery wet glove and you're trying to pick up a little scalpel off of a metal table, it can be hard to pick it back up because the handle is so flat and the thing is so small. It was felt to be safer and to prevent, a cut injury to just put it in the thigh so the blade is so that the handle is sticking out and you can just grab it.
I want to know who the first person was that thought of that.
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that at the time was actually trained into medical professionals during dissections. Mm-hmm. They're saying, okay, well, if you need to put your scalpel down, you stick it in the thigh and that makes it a little bit more efficient. So it's something that was actually taught. Nowadays, that could contaminate evidence or, it's not really common practice anymore, but it's something that was done very commonly back in the day. And medical examiners immediately noticed that on many of the remains that they found, there was a slit in the thigh. So that he said that it would be consistent with that practice, just like a lone small slit in the thigh. So really only somebody who had undertaken many dissections or had been trained formally medically could have done those dissections.
Like, here, hold this.
Yep. Yep, exactly. So the papers got a hold of, these other findings, like these swaths of skin that were being found and like the, mutilated body parts and the genitalia and all that stuff that was super, super shocking. And they started spinning it and sort of taking some of those artistic liberties. And they actually published stories that were not verified. And I have no idea if any of this is true, but they were published that he had like books bound in human skin, and that he had, like, a ring of skulls decorating his living room, which, like, he didn't. But I don't know if, and like, whether or not he had a book of human skin. I don't know. It was not able to verify that. I think that was probably just something that the papers published to, grab headlines. Yeah. Meanwhile, Masu was struggling to try to put all of this together and try to build, a case against him that accurately describes exactly what they're doing. Petiot is still very active within this resistance group, the FFI, and he's still, like, working as a captain. He's interrogating people. He's hunting down spies, and he's all scraggly. He had grown that beard. His hair was out. Like, he was just vibing.
The investigation is getting put together, but they still don't have a clue where he is.
No, because he's living under an alias.
They don't know that he's, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That would have driven, I would imagine, like, can you imagine that guy as he's building this case, like, in his mind, like, where are you? Like, drive him nuts.
Yes. And he's thinking at this point, this guy could be anywhere. Like, he probably is across Europe or in, South America or whatever, trying, like, we've given him enough opportunity at this point to get away. I don't know where in the world this guy could be. So that's sort of where that
in the
stands.
World is Dr. Satan?
I used to love Carmen Sandiego when I was a kid. It's the best. People that he had grown to know within the resistance that knew him as Henri Valeri reported later that he would really only leave his home to, like, go out for food or to, like, get a book. Because, he's, like, obsessed with reading. That's, like, the one thing he does to pass his time. People were starting to report sightings, like, oh, I saw him at, like, a train station, and, like, someone saw him on the street or in, like, a busy store. And police did check these out, but they were like, there's no way he's, like, still in Paris. Like, this guy's had such an opportunity to, GTFO. Why the hell would he be sticking around here?
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, the FFI was actually commissioned by the French police to help investigate Petiot and try to find him. So funnily enough,
looking for himself,
Marcel was tasked with finding himself. I shit you not. Can you imagine the power trip that this must have given this guy, though? Like, he's like, yes, I am outsmarting everybody.
Not expecting.
Yes, I know. Isn't that wild?
I'm going to guess that I'm going to guess that he failed. However, like, I could also be like, well, his alias is probably, like, just as narcissist and doesn't want to fail. Mm-hmm. So I could see it going, like, that's like fighting with yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like,
yeah, he's like, now I have ultimate control. Like, I could steer this whole investigation if I wanted to. You know what I mean?
Man.
One article that was published in particular seemed to really, like, irk Petiot more than usual. It's not really clear why or what they said or what phrasing was used in this article that, like, really lit a fire under his ass, but, like, it bothered him enough that he sat down and he wrote a letter to an old defense attorney that defended him during his drug charges back in 1942. And he said, this is all lies. The Gestapo was driving all of this. I was killing Nazis, this is all bullshit and blah, blah, blah. So he was basically just calling everything lies and, like, they're all calling me a monster. It's not true and blah, blah, blah. Well, the defense attorney did not reach back out to Petiot and try to help him. He immediately turned the letter over to authorities because he's a decent human being, thankfully.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was kind of the turning point a little bit in the investigation, because once police heard that he had responded to this particular article, they noticed, well, this was a Parisian paper that this was published in. Yeah. So this guy's in Paris.
He's here.
Imagine that debrief in the police station. Well, you guys, we fucked up. Like,
we fucked up. People probably have been seeing him around town, and we did not check that out nearly enough. Whoops. So, during this manhunt, the search for Petiot did reveal, obviously, numerous accomplices, many of whom were arrested as accessories to murder around this time. This included his brother Maurice, his friend René Nezonde, who was like his quote-unquote closest friend. And there was a barber in town who was found to be referring people that were in hiding to Petiot. So he was like feeding new clients to Petiot. So they found him out. And his wife, Georgette, was also held and questioned and briefly arrested as an accessory to murder as well. And there's more on her a little bit later. So Massu knows that Petiot has like undeniably one of the biggest egos ever, and he's a total narcissist. And they also knew that he was very smart and that they could use all of that to his advantage. So the cops approach the FFI, whom they're working with to try and find Petiot. And they say, specifically, I'd like to, set up a big team debrief about how we're going to go about finding Petiot. And they knew that if Petiot was in Paris, it is 100% likely that he was involved in the FFI, because that was the big resistance, and Petiot was always for the resistance.
That was what he was part of, yeah.
Yep. So Petiot, of course, the FFI, of course, obliges. Yes, of course, whatever we can do to help. So they set up this huge, meeting. And Petiot's probably thinking, man, if I can, like, assist in the search for myself, what a freaking scam, dude. Yeah.
Looking for Petiot, and he's sitting in the room.
He's literally right there. So during one of these, like, big gatherings that they held, despite having grown out his hair and his beard, he's finally recognized. He's, wrestled down, he's handcuffed, he's dragged into custody. So on his person when he's arrested, he has a pistol, 32,000 francs, and 50 sets of identification documents. 50.
What? 50 different aliases?
I think yes. I don't know what one would need 50 at one time for.
I don't know about you guys. I'm not a professional in criminal justice, but that is a red flag.
Definitely a red flag. So he's brought to prison at La Sante prison, which is, one of the bigger prisons in the city. And once the city got a hold of the news that he was finally in custody, everybody like rejoiced and was like partying in the streets. And, obviously the papers were plastered, this Dr. Satan's been caught. Yay! And while in prison, an intense interrogation process begins. Because again, police knew at this point that these were political refugees that Petiot had been killing. But they had little means to identify these people at all, and to figure out who, at least some of them was going to take some work. And they also...
This was over years.
Yes.
This was over years.
2 years. So, 2 years he was doing this, like, regularly.
You can imagine.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece of this was that they really had no means to figure out how these people were being killed at this point. So Petiot maintained, once he was arrested, that all these people were German spies.
Even the kids.
Even the children and women.
Even the kids. Yep.
Yes. Mostly women spies. Women German soldiers in 1940. Yeah.
Super common.
Yeah, super common. Super common. And again, this is like...
I don't think it was common to have women spy. Like, they were...
No.
There were some, but like... I know we had some on like the good people side. But like
good people side. Yes, we did. But they weren't like so common that he would have like a majority of his victims be women in that era. Like that makes no sense. So, but again, it's like that I'm going to argue my point, and whether or not it's logical is completely irrelevant. I'm just going to keep saying it until someone agrees with me.
Someone will believe me.
His own lies.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Everybody else to believe his lies too.
Exactly. Police commissioners draw up this indictment, and during his indictment hearing, Petiot's lawyer encouraged him just to say your name and say nothing else. Just don't talk. Like, you have one job today, and that's to say your name and don't talk. But he didn't listen, and he can't help himself. So he made a statement. He made a statement anyway. Again, he thinks he can talk his way out of anything. So he stated in the court, quote, "My conscience does not reproach me in the least. I am proud of what I did as a patriot. If I have not obeyed all civil laws, I have obeyed all laws of war," end quote.
Sounds like something he would put on a flyer.
Yeah, that's accurate. Bullshit.
I'm surprised he got an attorney to represent him. Is that like provided by the country, or is he has money to hire somebody? That's crazy.
He actually had he had money, and he had a team of lawyers who had a great reputation for being very attentive to detail and very, they were like celebrity lawyers in the area. And
think about it.
This is a high profile case.
Yeah.
O.J. Simpson,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We can make some money off this. Our name. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So they were very eager to help him out. Mm-hmm. And so from here, the pre-trial questioning process starts, which I guess back in the day essentially is when the lawyers are doing their own investigation, preparing for the case, and doing their own research into the crimes, which would ultimately last about 14 months before the trial actually starts. And of course, Petiot states that each of these bodies were German soldiers, spies, or collaborators whom were all against the resistance, and they were all identified by other members of the resistance. And of course, initially he denies actually killing any one of them. And he said, they were just using my boiler. I didn't actually kill anybody. I was just the guy with the boiler. That's my only role in this whole thing. I was just the guy with the boiler.
I had no idea what they were doing, I promise.
Exactly.
Who put that there?
So, of course, he couldn't give... So he said that other members of the resistance had killed them, and that he was just there because he had, been bestowed the unfortunate task of having to dismember and dispose of the bodies. But, of course, he couldn't give any details on the names of the people that actually killed him or, any other details whatsoever. He was just like, nope, wasn't me. Wasn't me. So, he states that it was a colleague of his who suggested they cut up the bodies and burn them. And that he had just bought the property, and the first time he ever used the boiler, he stated, was to dispose of some human remains. And he had never used the boiler prior to that moment. His defense attorneys, knowing the political climate, clung to Petiot's position as a patriot and hoped for the best. Because, again, everything is so
Fingers
political.
Crossed, guys.
Well, this case became a huge political thing because... it was very politically fueled, and then, there were people that were of the resistance and French citizens who actually were kind of rooting for Petiot because of the whole political nature of all of this, which is absurd, but again, this is the reality.
Doesn't know any better, yeah. It just kind
of... Exactly. So, additionally... his defense team drew on his prior mental hospital stays and old records of him being found incapable of being held accountable for his own actions. They drew on all of that.
Oh, Lord.
This wouldn't be a great avenue for them, I guess, though, because he apparently continued to receive disability payments from the government even after he graduated medical school, after he was elected mayor, after he had built a medical practice. Literally, up until a year prior to this, he was still collecting disability from the government.
So up until he essentially went into hiding.
Yeah. So for Like almost 20 years. He was collecting disability payments. So during this 14-month period, when they're kind of going over everything and preparing for the trial, he's held in prison. He was obviously deemed an extreme flight risk, so they finally decided that they could not just like let him walk around. He was confined to a 7x7 cell. He passed his days by reading, drawing, and writing. He also chain smoked a lot, pretty much smoked constantly, and he picked up needlepoint and crochet, which I found
good for him.
Interesting.
Who would give him a needle, first of all?
Good for him.
What kind of is this?
That is dumb. Who would give him anything pointy? I don't know who made that decision.
But he didn't do anything malice with it. Like, he didn't do anything bad with it. He cross-stitched?
Yeah. He just was like making little
cross-stitching.
Very murdery little things.
He made murder scarves.
For his cellmate, maybe.
Yes, that's exactly.
I made this for you.
I made this
we need some decor on the cement walls.
Yes, it was looking very blah in there, and he had to spice things up.
Self-care Sundays, guys.
Yeah, self-care.
In the French prison.
Exactly. And due to the media attention his crimes got, he was kept isolated from other inmates to avoid like altercations. And he was described by guards as not showing an ounce of emotion in his face pretty much ever. And that those who read any of his writings were, they were just like strikingly odd and very politically fueled rants of a crazy person, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That tracks.
That tracks. Yeah, that makes sense. So, meanwhile, authorities are still trying to identify some of these victims. They did have some names that they found inside belongings and suitcases that were discovered at his brother's house. So they were starting to kind of build that like correlating with some of the people that had been reported missing. They were able to find that, it's very likely that, your so-and-so was involved in this. Yep.
Oh.
They questioned thousands of people during this investigation, including, anybody who could have known him or worked with him, other members of the FFI, families of missing people, other local business owners who interacted with him regularly, literally anybody who could have known a damn thing. So,
I mean, the guy was mayor, for Christ's sake, so think about how many people
But
he's
not in
involved
Paris.
With.
He wasn't mayor in Paris. He was mayor in the other town. I know.
That's still part of the thousands of people.
You're right.
Thank you.
So, March 18th, 1946, the trial begins. There are thousands of spectators gathered around the courthouse. And this was like the trial of the century. It was an absolute freaking circus. And Petiot had a really hard time staying quiet for any of it. Again, his attorneys are like, can you just not talk? Like, don't say anything. And he's just like, no, I can't do that.
Maybe he should have practiced some of that needle stitch on his mouth to keep it.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe just
Let me take the stand.
Yeah.
Put me on the stand.
Put me in, coach.
Put me in. Yeah, I was about to say. Put me in, coach. I can play.
So, I mean, again, he was interjecting. He was speaking over his attorneys and like trying to interrogate witnesses himself, and just like, again, he's just doing everything he can to like try to control the narrative and make sure he's getting his like point across, and there's like no orderly fashion about it because he's a mess. And there's a number of expert witnesses. The defense team attacked them. They spun the narrative that the investigation was handled hastily because of the political issues running in the background in the war, which like maybe that was true, I'm not sure. But the prosecutors had a lot of witnesses in their back pocket, and they were able to start painting a picture of, who he actually is as a person. And police were actually able to identify people who were like approached by Petiot or his lackeys, but whom eventually backed out because they felt like something wasn't right. And a couple of those people like testified and gave a very interesting story. So one of the more interesting witnesses was a Michael Caderet de Lepinois, which I hope I said that right. I apologize if I did not.
Mom.
Where's my mom?
We need mom.
He was a 33-year-old Jewish man who was in search of an escape route with his wife and children during the occupation. And he was referred to Petiot by, apparently he worked as a driver, and there was a chauffeur that he worked with that referred him to Petiot. They first met Petiot and some of his accomplices and were immediately suspicious that they were unable to provide them with a straight answer of where they were going, how they were going to get there. Like, they just said, "Oh, you're going to South America, probably Argentina." But it's like, but where am I? But where? Like, I want to know where, and like, how is this happening? And they were like, "Oh, I don't," and they just like didn't give him a straight answer. So immediately he was like, "Okay, my feelers are up."
Good for him.
They both felt like Petiot himself was a little sus because he seemed like he was under the influence of something, and they were very put off by his appearance. He was disheveled. In particular, they noticed that his fingernails were black. And they were like, that's a little unusual of like someone who says they're a physician and they're trying to give me a shot. Like, you're dirty. You're like a dirty man.
Where's your infection control?
Yeah. And so they just hightailed it out of there because they felt like this does not seem to make a whole lot of sense. And as it turns out, they probably like narrowly escaped being victims of his.
Mm-hmm. Think about this guy's mindset. Like, so if he's Jewish, he's trying to get out, because, I mean, if he, gets caught by a Nazi, he's going to go to a concentration camp, so he's trying to save himself and his family, but then this guy must have triggered him so much for him to be like, nope.
That desperation just
to
was
think
overridden.
that he's going to stay, think that he's going to stay in France instead of going with him.
I'll keep looking.
Like, you're desperate if you're trying to use, like, the underground way to get out.
Right. Exactly.
But so that guy...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go with your gut. That says, always go with the gut.
Go with the gut, man. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, medical examiners take the stand. They start discussing in detail the remains that were found. Again, the majority are women. The age of the adults that were found range from about age 25 to age 50, with one small child found that was around 5 to 7 years of age.
Oh.
It was difficult to pinpoint the exact dates of death because the lye that they were in would accelerate the decomposition and mummification process. So there were so many variables that building any accurate timeline based on the decomposition was like impossible. They couldn't do it. They did testify about the scalpel marks in the thighs and how, that led them to believe that Petiot was directly involved in at least the dismemberment. There was they testified about some insect activity because sometimes that can help them build timelines, based on the larva, infestation on the bodies. But again, the decomposition and the burning would destroy a lot of that. So they were really able to provide a whole lot of a timeline. Psychiatrists who had examined Petiot were called to the stand also to discuss his mental status and his mental health history. Every single one of the physicians who had declared him unable to be held responsible for his own decisions in the past were all like committed to that. And they said, I staunchly believe he is not faking. And I still believe to this day that he had, a primary psychiatric issue, at least at that time. And I'm not changing my opinion on that.
And that's that.
And that's the end of that.
That's that.
So anytime during the trial he was met with actual evidence that supported or suggested that he participated in the murders, he would like scoff or mumble something or just like be a total smartass just like under his breath and just was very disruptive like in general and was kind of just like a gross human being. He maintained during the trial that the people that had gone missing and were never heard from again, he actually did help and he got them to South America and that's where they are. They're all living in South America. And that's why he had some of their belongings. They're all living in South America. These bodies have nothing to do with that.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yep. He did eventually detail during the trial that he did murder 16 of the bodies found in his home, but they were Nazis. They weren't refugees or anything.
Not those women with the underpants.
Not the child. Them. Not the 5-year-old. Yeah.
Mm.
Yep. So, surprisingly, it was Renee Nezonde, Petiot's oldest friend, who would provide the testimony that was actually most damaging to Petiot's defense. He had received a deal to have his charges reduced in exchange for testifying against Petiot in the trial, which he took. So he recalled on the stand that when he first realized that Petiot was really doing with these people, and he was reaching out to him for help, he recalled that Petiot had looked at him and gave him this haunting, explanation of where these people were going. And he recalled on the stand that he had said, quote, "The journey begins and ends at Rue Lasser," end quote. With a creepy ass little smile on his face, insinuating that people come into this house and they don't
never leave.
You go in and you don't go out.
Yep. So Renee stated when he realized that, he didn't go straight to authorities because now he's realizing what Petiot is capable of, and how would he retaliate if he found out that I went against him? And he's like, he's got so many people helping him that I'll know, I'm gonna be next. If I try to throw this guy under the bus. So he also recounted that he never saw Petiot inject anybody, but he did see a huge supply of syringes and multiple poisonous compounds within the Rue Lasser home. So there was a woman put on the stand named Marguerite Braunberger who testified that her husband had gone missing. And he had mentioned to her before he left the day that he went missing that, I have a meeting at the metro station with a doctor who says he can help get you and I out of the country. So I'm going to go meet with him so that we can make a plan on how this is all going to go work. So he leaves for the train station and he was never seen again. During the investigation, a blue and white striped shirt was found in one of Petiot's properties, which was identified by Marguerite as the shirt her husband was wearing the day that he disappeared. So the shirt also had her husband's initials on the inner collar. So it was
devastating.
It is very sad, and to not know, you know what I mean? To know that this terrible thing happened, but there's so much uncertainty around the exact, series of events that it's just so sad.
Where is any part of him left?
Exactly. And where is he? He's never going to be at rest. So when Marcel was asked to explain this on the spot in court, which apparently was a thing back then, he refused to answer. And he was even asked why the shirt that had the missing man's initials on it was found in his property. Petiot dismissed it, just like any other piece of evidence, and he would minimize it and somehow try to sway the crowd into thinking that it wasn't a big deal. His little outbursts, would happen, and they would rile up the crowds of spectators who would come to witness the trial. And at times the trial turned into such a circus that they would need to hold a recess or break for the day. Because everything just got...
Where was the judge in all of this? Because usually they don't... Their court's getting too out of hand,
Right.
Yeah. And the judge was actually did a good job, I felt. And I don't have his name in front of me. But he's the one that would just end the whole thing when things got crazy and be like, fine, we're done for the day. You all need to go home. I can't... this is getting ridiculous.
Yeah. Don't give him the attention that he's so clearly
Exactly. We're stopping.
You're done.
Yep. We are all done. Marcel was so charismatic, though, that even at his own murder trial, he's getting laughs from the crowd sometimes. He'll make a little comment and people are laughing and kind of cheering him on. And it's it's almost who was that?
Wow.
Ted Bundy. We're talking about so many other murderers, but remember Ted Bundy, during his trial, he defended himself, and he there was a whole courtroom of people that were laughing and cheering him on. And it's hello, does anybody... Am I being punked? This guy's a murderer.
Right.
Stop.
People lost their lives. This isn't a show.
Exactly. It was also said that he was getting fan mail from crazy ladies who wanted to marry him.
Ew. Come on, girls.
I know. Girls.
Child's hand from the boiler. Come on.
There's other better men.
What did we say in the last episodes? Is there literally no one else? Nobody else?
Anyone?
Anyone?
Bueller? Anybody else?
There's probably better at the bottom of the barrel than these guys, you know?
Like literally, he is the bottom. He's underneath the barrel. He's the Famunda cheese under the barrel.
He is the barrel.
He is the barrel. So he was also photographed during his trial napping on several occasions.
Oh, come on. Guys, I'm tired.
Like, they would just look over and, like, I don't know if he was just, like, faking it to just, like, try to give a big middle finger to everybody, or
So
if he
stressful.
was legitimately napping in the middle of his murder trial. I don't know, but they would publish it. Like, the papers would publish these pictures of him, like...
Oh,
You're like, are we boring you with the talk of the people you killed?
Yeah,
or...
yeah,
I'm sorry.
exactly. So we don't know if that was real or what.
Show.
The following account is like one of the more harrowing like recollections of what happened that I was able to find. There was a man known as Raphael K, only his last initial was K, who had applied for Petiot's escape network as he was trying to get safely out of Paris at the time. He met in some creepy alley with Petiot and a couple of accomplices, and he expressed urgency and that he wanted to leave as soon as possible because the Germans knew who he was and where he lived, and they were like knocking on his door, and he was actively in hiding. And with that, Petiot said to him, "Wow, what a remarkable luck. We have a group leaving first thing in the morning, and you can just join them and you'll be off to Argentina." And Raphael stated that Marcel told him, "Bring with you as much cash as you can when you come tomorrow." And he was instructed to write letters to all of his close relatives about where he was going. And he was told that he would end up in Casablanca and to not expect to hear from him for like quite a while. So he penned all of these letters himself to all of his family members.
It's like that other guy.
I know. Yes. Holmes with the letters.
Mm-hmm. All these
So-
guys.
Set it up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He was brought to 21 Rue Le Sur, and Marcel administered him an injection, which he said was just an inoculation against some diseases. Raphael, minutes later, started feeling weak, fatigued, and like his heartbeat was slowing down. He lost consciousness and just remembers waking up in a small boiler room in the basement of that building. And he looked over at the door, and he sees like this smoky gas substance seeping from under the door into the room, like it's being fed by like a hose into the room.
Oh my God.
And experts later theorized that this could have been hydrogen cyanide gas, which we talked about in the first episode, like the gas version of cyanide. He was miraculously like able to muster up enough strength to get himself up, and thankfully the door was like unlocked and he was able to like scoot out of the house.
What?
And there must have been some kind of oversight, like they didn't lock the door, or I think they must have underdosed him with whatever they tried to give him to put him to sleep, and he somehow survived.
What?
But they tried to literally make a gas chamber out of the basement.
Oh my God. Ooh.
Isn't that wild?
It's like that guy was essentially like buried alive.
Yeah, essentially. Like, because of this testimony, it's theorized that Petiot had been also maybe just sedating people with these injections, of giving them morphine or what have you, and then dragging them in to be gassed, like in this gas chamber that he made. So it was then time for defense to call witnesses, and they mostly comprised of fellow patriots who just attested to Petiot's incredible acts of patriotism over the years and his commitment to the resistance and to all the people of France and blah, 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 blah.
I was just going to say blah, blah, blah.
No real evidence. Like, there wasn't actual evidence. It was all just like character stuff about how great of a guy he was, and, you know, how he was fighting for the country, and just ridiculous. While the prosecution did a good job painting a picture of, you know, how he would lure his victims, there was no chemical evidence of what he actually used to murder his victims. There were only these, like, very few eyewitness accounts that alluded to he gave injections, Maybe he created a gas chamber, but we're not positive because the vast majority of these people are dead, and he's not admitting to anything. So, it's thought that the injections were his main method of operation, but again, no real way to know. And Nezonde had been the one to state that he had seen the cyanide compounds and all of those syringes, but there are other possibilities too. Experts later theorized, like, he could have been, sticking these needles intravenously and been giving air embolisms. He could have been giving big boluses of morphine. He could have given other compounds like digitalis, like digoxin he had on hand. We had seen that in his house. So all these things that they really had no great testing for back then. And a lot of the physical evidence was destroyed in the fires and with the lime. So they're not exactly sure how the killings happened, unfortunately. But we have, at least one eyewitness account that suggested that cyanide or gas was used. So closing arguments come, and prosecutor said of Petiot, quote, "To find as many cadavers, to see as much blood, to witness as many killings, one must go to the other side of the Rhine to the terrible charnel houses of Buchenwald and Auschwitz. There are so many people that have been so systematically murdered by Nazi barbarians," which, like, they're likening him to a Nazi, which is why I was
yes.
Exactly. They also named Petiot, quote, "remarkably intelligent, a wonderful actor, devoid of all scruples, and deeply perverted and sadistic," end quote.
Accurate.
Accurate. The trial in total lasted about 16 days. And when they ended the trial on the final day, when the verdict was read, his wife and his brother were both in the courtroom that day. Ultimately, there was evidence that these bodies had been worked on by a skilled surgeon. There were pieces of the bodies found at Rue sur that corresponded to bodies that were pulled from the Seine. There were witnesses for the prosecution that felt that he was working with the resistance, and they also found witnesses that said that they were buddies with him within the resistance when he was going by Henri Valeri, and that he was bragging to people that he had executed 63 people. And that he was calling these, quote, liquidations. That's what he was calling what he did with these bodies. Liquidations.
Just all part of his assets.
Yeah. And finally, the jury...
What did the defense say about him?
Oh, just that he was a patriot. Just that he was a great man that fought for his country, and yeah, that's it. They had really no evidence. They had nothing. So finally, the jury hands down the verdict, and they find him guilty of 26 counts of murder.
Boom.
I know.
Yeah.
His sentence was handed down immediately by the judge that was presiding, who sentenced him to death by guillotine.
Ooh. Yes.
Remember, we're in France.
Yes.
Guillotine.
Guillotine in France.
It's very dramatic.
Dr. Petiot. So the media was there. They captured him being completely calm and aloof during his sentencing. He made no expression whatsoever. The courtroom was totally silent apart from a gasp from his wife, apparently. His wife went, oh no. Oh my God.
This is it.
Gee, babe. Oh no. When he was being led out of the courtroom, he looked at his family and shouted, quote, "I must be avenged."
Oh my.
End quote. Is this Vikings? No one avenges anyone. This is the 20th century.
I know. Not Romeo and Juliet.
Avenge my death, my child.
Avenge me! No one's going to avenge you. Weirdo. So, honestly, it's worth noting that, the defense, if they wanted to win this, they probably should have just had him, plead insanity. Because...
he's done the rest of his life.
Right
along!
But they would have had a good case. They would have had a lot of psychiatrists that stuck to their guns. Mm-hmm. They would have like, his team of lawyers would never admit it, but when this kind of came out later on, like, hey, experts were kind of analyzing how the case went, and like, you could have just had the guy plead insanity and you probably would have had a very strong case. And his lawyers would never admit it, but it seemed pretty straightforward and would have been like a slam dunk. And there was suspicion years down the line that his lead defense had actually shown a strong bias against him and the resistance around the time, and that he may have appointed other lawyers that like threw the case and were just like, fuck this guy, and just intentionally fucked him over, because like that would have been a pretty obvious solution to their case. So
things work out sometimes, I guess.
Sometimes things work themselves out, don't they?
If that's true, that guy's my hero.
Yeah.
This guy, that's the guy. And meanwhile, his band of buddies who helped him and his wife Georgette were charged with conspiracy. And while his collaborators did spend some time in jail, Georgette was eventually released because they could never really connect her to any actual murders and really prove that she knew exactly what was going on. She did give a few interviews during and after the trial. She stated that she was struggling with depression and anxiety because of the entire thing. She was quoted to have said, quote, "Nothing more can touch me now," end quote. Like, because she was just so devastated about the whole situation. Like, nothing, like, do whatever you want to me, nothing else can,
You should have picked better, lady.
I know, right? And she was apparently devastated that her husband had gone through this, and even wrote a book about her experiences later in life.
Word.
11 years after the trial and her husband's death, she maintained that he was innocent. Like, she 100% felt like he was innocent this entire time. Maintained that forever.
Come on, lady.
I know, lady. Like, get it together.
Really sticking with that? You sure?
Really? Are you sure?
You sure?
Really? Are you sure?
Interesting.
Yep. Petiot's team did file a bunch of appeals right after the trial, which were all denied. While he was on death row, he was described as being very calm, seemingly unfazed by the whole thing.
He probably is thinking he's not actually going to die.
Yes, exactly. He's like, I'll get out of this somehow. This isn't going to happen. Like, I'm going to get out of this somehow. On May 25th of 1946, the guillotine was assembled in the courtyard of the prison he was being held in. A big crowd gathered, as it was expected. It was, of course, a circus, just like everything else about this guy. He was offered a last glass of rum and a last cigarette, which he declined. He was brought out in ankle shackles and handcuffs. He looked at the officials there and stated, quote, "Gentlemen, I am at your disposal," end quote.
He is so weird.
Such a fucking weirdo.
Like,
which I'd probably say some weird shit too if this was mean. But yeah, I know.
Do what you must.
Super weird. Do what you must.
Right.
So this isn't the last weird thing he says. So he's led up to the guillotine, where they apparently shave the nape of his neck, because apparently they got to do that maybe to make a clean cut or something. I'm not sure.
Don't want to get any hair in the way.
Can't get the hair in the way. So they shaved the nape of his neck, and he was asked if he had any last words or confessions. He responded, quote, "No, I am a traveler who is taking all of my baggage with me," end quote. And then he smiled and stated, quote, "Gentlemen, I suggest you look away. This will not be pretty to see," end quote.
I feel like he's like cosplaying, like the drama.
Yes. He's like a caricature of himself.
LARPing, maybe.
I know he's LARPing. He's LARPing hard. Yes, the drama. It's all about the showmanship with this guy. And so with that, at 5 minutes of 5 p.m., his head dropped into the basket, and Marcel Petiot was fucking finally dead.
He was no more.
And the clouds parted, and the sun came out.
Right.
And there's a rainbow over the Eiffel Tower.
And there was a rainbow. Yes, and a dragon flew by. Yes, exactly. His assets all went to his wife and children. The belongings found among his properties were brought to the families. Anything that was identified as being belongings to somebody who was missing was returned. Somehow I feel like
I'm not okay with that. Like, that's his assets. That's his murder money.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, not all of it was murder money, but a lot of it was. Anything that could be potentially like identified was returned to who they thought it belonged to, thankfully. And some of these people were actually able to be identified, but there were many that will probably never be identified, unfortunately. That's the fucking end of Dr. Petiot, though. Phew.
Let's take a deep breath. And
Cleansing breath.
Holy fuck, this shit's over.
Yes,
it's over.
It's like
quite the run.
I mean, yes, he did.
Like,
It was a lot.
He's the
Can't believe he was searching for himself. That's still.
I was not expecting that.
That is a twist.
That is a fucking twist of fate.
How? You're like, all right,
how.
we need to help look for this guy, and he's just sitting there like,
And he's literally like staring at a picture of himself, and he's like, "Yep, I'm gonna find you, motherfucker."
Or looking at the picture like, I've never seen this guy.
This guy's real good looking. Yeah.
It's like Flynn Rider, but they still can't get my nose.
They can't get my nose right.
Oh man,
my nose that big?
I know, right?
I don't know.
No, it's not.
Well, Kate, thank you. I mean, this was a doozy. This was this was a lot of work. This was like, not only were you like, you know, I'm in the heavy of it when we're listening to it, but you like to have to put it all together. It's like you've been living Dr. Satan for the last, month or so as of us recording it. So kudos to your mental health.
Thank you. Yes, it's suffering, but now that it's over, I can just move on with my life, which is great.
You guys, I love this podcast. This is like the only one that I have notifications turned on for.
Yay! My heart, my fangirl heart.
As soon as I see it, I'm like, Allie, I get to listen to it during work tomorrow.
Well, I am honored that you were our first guest, Hospice Nurse Allie. This was literally so fun. We need to do this again.
A dream. I told my daughter heard about it. I'm like, I get to be, I guess what's today.
I told some people today, I was like, we have a guest host, and they're like, huh? What? I'm like, yes, and we're like, we do. Fuck yeah. It's happening.
And she's awesome. And and they're like, who is it? And I'm like, she's right here. And I show them like your TikTok and your Instagram, like a total creep. But they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. I know. And I'm like, I know. She's so fun. She's so cool.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you
ladies.
again, Allie. I hope we get to talk to you
again.
Soon.
We will.
Yeah, well, keep in touch for sure. I'm always a message away, and you know where to find me.
Bye, Allie.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe out there.